Welcome to Ancient Greek Lyric Poetry. This presentation covers Greek lyric poetry. Greek lyric, of course, means not that it had lyrics, but it means that it was music or poetry performed to a lyre. Okay? The origins of Greek poetry are really in Ionia. And so it is that we shouldn't think of Athens as the great center of Greek poetry, but a lot of these small islands in the Aegean Sea. Okay? The Ionian centers of cultures such as Samos, Delos, Lesbos, Thasos, Ephesus, same one as the Bible, and then one on the mainland, Thebes, which is, you can see on the map, is just north of Athens. So there's the island of Samos by Miletus, just south of Ephesus, the island of Delos, the island of Lesbos and Thasos in the north, the city of Ephesus, which was one of the great cultural centers of the ancient world, and the city of Thebes on the mainland, in Boeotia again, where Hesiod was from. Do you like the music in the background? I kind of like it. Now, Greek poetry has its beginnings with Homer, of course. And we know that he wrote in dactylic hexameter, and he wrote the long narrative poems of the Iliad and the Odyssey. Okay? But after Homer, we really have a branching out of style and of content. So, the epic poem, which deals with heroic themes, that's really continued by Hesiod. I mentioned that he wrote his Theogony in dactylic hexameter, and that is really like an epic poem, every bit as epic as the journey of Odysseus. Now, another group is what we call choral poetry. Choral poetry was group poetry. And the representative of that is a poet by the name of Pindar. He was greatly admired and respected, even to this day, as one of the great poets of ancient Greece. Eventually, the choral poetry turns into the chorus that we find in Greek drama and comedy. But when we're talking about lyric poetry, we're talking about monody or solo poetry. Okay? There are poems that express strong emotion, those are called elegiac, and there you see some of the poets: Xenophanes, Solon, Theognis. We have the iambic poetry, and iambus is a meter which was used to make fun of people. Archilochus, Simonides, and Hipponax. And if you read some of the selections in our textbook, you can understand why. And then we have the solo poetry, these love songs. Sappho and Alcaeus are both from the island of Lesbos. And the strong emotion, the baring of your soul, the opening up of your heart, this is the style of solo poetry. Now, ancient poetry was identified by the meter. Okay, it's really just ancient rap. Okay, a little less upbeat and a little slower, but nonetheless, you're making rhythm with long and shorts. Okay, and then the music in the background really isn't the melody so much as just the accompaniment. So the trochee, the iambus, and the dactyl, the anapest, and the spondee. So the trochee was a long, short. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow made great use of the trochee in the song near and dear to Minnesotans' heart, and that's the Song of Hiawatha. So he's catching the flavor of Indian, or how a tribesman might tell it around a campfire. And he uses this beat of the trochee, like, by the shores of Gitche Gumee, by the big sea shining water, stood the wigwam of Nokomis, daughter of the moon Nokomis. And you can just hear this Indian drum slowly driving the entire poem, just doom, 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 doom. Now the iambus is for making fun of people. Okay? So we don't even have to put in any words, and we recognize this in English, right? Da 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 da, and everybody starts cracking up. Now the dactyl is the heroic verse. This is what Homer wrote in. It's called a dactyl because of the long, short, short reminds you of the dactylus, the finger. Long, short, short finger. Bones in your finger. Dun 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 dun. The opening of the Homer. Andra moi ennepa musa politropon husmala pala. The anapest is rarer. It's just the opposite of that. Da da da. And then the spondee is also very common. It's just two longs. Da da. Kind of reminds me of that German hit song during the 80s, and it had just one lyric, which was da. I haven't seen it on YouTube, but it doesn't mean it's not there, but it just went da 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 da. Whatever. Okay? So, the dactylic hexameter that Homer and Hesiod used was characterized by 6 feet of dactyls. Da 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 da. Or we think of the beginning here of the Odyssey. Andra moi ennepa musa politropon hosmala pala plagthe epai troiesiaron polyethron persen. Okay, so the art of the poetry was in the arranging of the long and short syllables. Now, elegiac couplet often used dactylic hexameter followed by a line of 5 feet, or pentameter. Slatium digesta per annum, lapsaque subterras ortaque signa canam. Dan da da dan 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 da da dan 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 da 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 dan da da da. Okay, so that's elegiac, and it's what we call couplets because they often occurred in 2 units. Now the iambic was good for parody, jokes, personal attacks on people. It's very close to common speech, and quite frankly, English is by and large iambic. So, da 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 da. Now, there's all kinds of Greek meters and variations on the Ionian or the Aeolic meter. Sappho, spelled either with an S or just PS, she is the representative of the island of Lesbos who writes ballads and songs for musical accompaniment. So here's kind of a family tree of Greek poetry. Okay? And here we have a picture now of the island of Lesbos, where we have all these students. Now, some of the various instruments that we recognize to her play and recite her poetry, from vases and statuary and whatnot. But these are mostly vase paintings. So one style was called the kithara, and of course we get our modern word guitar from this. Now, in the Homeric hymn to Hermes, you heard about the development of the lyre and how the poet described it this way: cutting reed stalks to measure, he fastened them by piercing through the back of a tortoise shell. His mind intent, he stretched cowhide around the front, inserted 2 arms and joined them with a crossbar, and strung 7 harmonious strings of sheep gut. We're still using the 7-tone scale, aren't we? An octave is 8 notes from 1 to 1 again. But basically we have a 7-tone scale. Now here's an old coin, Athens, 4th to 5th century BC. And if you look closely, you can see Hermes here. He's grown quite a bit on his first day of life. And he's hammering into place the tortoiseshell lyre, which is kind of down by his right foot. This guy belongs in ZZ Top or Duck Dynasty. He's got the whole vertical beard thing going here. It's kind of cool. But the instrument he's playing was an import from the East called the barbitos. Here's the pharynx. You can see it's made out of cattle horn with a leather-bound resonator box. But again, we have basically 7 strings for the 7 tones of the Eastern scale. Now, why is Greek poetry important? Well, it's the first to individualize poetry. This is lyric poetry. It's the combination of music plus a personal voice. And so it always reflects a shift in society away from the group, the community, the nation, to individualism. And this is going to be one of the trademarks or hallmarks of classical Athens, the rise of the individual and the importance of the individual, not just the community or the nation. A lot of these poems were performed at the symposium, which is a Greek way of saying a nicey fancy term of saying, hey, let's drink together. Well, sin, you can see the preposition sin. Okay, so symposium, we drink together. Usually it was an all-guys affair, and sometimes it was pretty highbrow. A lot of times it was bawdy. A lot of times there were prostitutes there. But on a good number of occasions it was couples. It was husbands and wives, and they were just getting together, having a good time, drinking some wine, having some intellectual discussion. But it wasn't always like that. We see the personal voice come out in the poetry of Archilochus. Now, he's a Spartan. And the old saying in Sparta was that when mothers sent their sons off to battle, they would say, either come back carrying your shield or being carried on it. And now here you have this Spartan say, well, what if some barbaric Thracian glories in the perfect shield I left under a bush? I was sorry to leave it, but I saved my skin. Does it matter? Oh well, I'll buy a better one. Which is outrageous. A Spartan never talks like this. But there's that personal voice, your opinion, what I think, what I feel. This is what makes lyric poetry an important development. Pindar is the ultimate representative of what we call choral poetry. In fact, so lasting is Pindar's reputation that it was Pindar who was immortalized on the 2004 Olympic coin, what we call the Centennial Olympics, right? And there you see on the medals that the athletes won there in Athens, they had Pindar. Now, why Pindar? Well, if you notice in your textbook, a number of these long poems are called the Olympiads. So, Pindar was the official poet of the Olympics. Just like we have opening ceremonies at our modern Olympics, and it's kind of a cultural affair, Pindar would write a lengthy poem that was performed at the onset of the Olympics. And we have a number of these, and they're called the Olympiads. And they celebrate the human spirit. In that way, they're really no different than our modern Olympics. Here you see an allusion to Tantalus in the first Olympian of Pindar. Pindar was so important that when Alexander the Great came south, he destroyed the city of Thebes except for one building. He left the house of Pindar standing because he had been raised on learning Pindaric verse and greatly admired the poet. But here's Tantalus, alluded to in the first Olympian poem, the guy who is tormented in hell by standing in water. He's burning of thirst. There's fruit over his head. He can't reach it. And whenever he bows his neck to drink the water, it disappears. So he has been tantalized for all eternity, or is being tantalized. Here we also have an allusion to Pelops. There were women who did race chariots in the ancient Greek Olympians. A lot of times they were Spartan, but here you see that depicted on one of these Greek vases. And then we have Sappho. Sappho. And here you see or hear the poem that about Phainatai Moi, that man. Now I'm going to crank up the volume here a little bit and let you listen to a modern interpretation of this poem. It lasts about 2 minutes, but it's kind of done with ancient Greek lyre, and this is a modern interpretation of what Greek poetry may have sounded like. Okay, now the offspring of Greek lyric poetry is threefold. In France, they become the troubadours, the traveling singers, and they would sing epics with their little guitars and stuff. And in Germany, virtually the same thing, the Minnesänger. Okay, so we can't quite make England, it 2 minutes, really and quite frankly, it's kind of hard to dance to. Representation of how it influenced English, and this is actually a very famous poem, especially the sonnets. You can see this translation on this page, especially the Romantic Age poets of the 1800s, who was one of the Byron, Harlem Renaissance Shelley, Keats, Coleridge, in American literature. Those guys. Who were great lovers of Greek culture. You can see. And then we also have, now, this like is a Ezra poem by Sappho, but it is written 20th about century man, lyric so poem. These assumptions that Sappho, still to this day, the 20th century folk music movement, raging homosexual. And I'm thinking of like Peter, Paul, and Mary. You kind of have to read that into some of the poems. Joan Baez, like I said, this is definitely and Simon and Garfunkel. That really captures Greek lyric poetry, and you really ought to consider them to be a descendant of the Greek lyric poets. And there's kind of a little bit of a revival of that going on now in this generation. Okay? So I just wanted to wrap up things. That's the end of this particular presentation on Greek lyric poetry. Hope you found it informative, and thanks for tuning in. This has been your host, Professor Keith Wessel. Kalos, Hemera.